What's going on out there, folks? Welcome on in another edition of Over and Back. Can't believe playoffs already coming into form. 3 weeks left in the regular season, so this PLL season, you blink and it'll pass you by. Can't wait to welcome in our guest this week. We've had a lot of great guests through our 8 weeks of Over and Back here, but we have had none so yoked as the guy we're bringing on the show here today. We got, you know him, you love him, a retired player, former MLL MVP, co-founder of the Faceoff Academy. If you don't know who I'm talking about yet, catch him every week on the Rise Up podcast. We got the beast, Greg Gurenlian, joining the show. Greg, thanks for joining us, man. How you doing, brother?
I'm doing well, brother. Can't complain. How about you? Doing well?
I'm doing excellent. We get to talk lacrosse. We get to talk betting lacrosse. And, I get to have a former MVP hop on the show. So I'm a pig in shit this week, Greg. I'm excited to get into this one. You can always hit him with a great follow on Twitter at GregBeast32. Before we get into the games this week, you and Scotty been doing a great show, Rise Up Pod. Let people know where they can find it and how that kind of came about, because that's a match made in heaven with you two guys on that show, man.
Thanks a lot, man. Yeah, over the last couple of years since I retired, whenever Scotty and I hang out in Baltimore, have a beer, we always talked about, let's do a show together. It'd be great. Luckily for us, Torch Pro picked it up, came to us with a really good offer, and they've done a great job with us. So me, Scotty, and Danny Seibel, who actually had a cup of coffee with the Boston Cannons at one point, Villanova stud, he kind of moderates it. And I use the word moderate instead of host because he kind of keeps me and Scotty from going at each other. But it's great. And, we still are intensely – it's cool for me being a fan now. I'm a fan of professional lacrosse. I want the PLL to do well. But it's good to have a place where not only – it's not just a fanboy podcast. We hold people accountable a little bit. But we get into the nitty-gritty, and I think the players like coming on to it. So it's been a really good time so far. People can see it on Spotify. They can get it on Apple. They can also see it on YouTube if they want to see, Scotty and I's ugly mug. They can feel free to do that as well.
I think you're selling yourself a little short on that side of things, Greg, but definitely check it out. Rise Up Pod. Great listen every week to get you ready for the PLL games. So speaking of which, let's get into it, man. Friday night, a team that you know well, Redwoods are laying the goal and a half as they're taking on Cannons. Total 24.5. For what it's worth, all the games this week, despite it being week 8, our team's seen each other for the first time this year. So I thought that was a little bit of an interesting note, but I don't know, Greg. Like, this one feels like they had to make somebody favored in this game because, yes, the Redwoods are 1.5-point favorites, but they haven't been historically great as favorites, and they win as a 2.5-point dog, and then they lose as a 1.5-point favorite. So this team's just been tough for me to figure out. You have a little bit better of a read, or are you scratching your head alongside with us?
That's what the Woods do, man. That's what we did when I played in 2019.
It's fair.
We were like, when we beat the Atlas first week, when the Atlas were like, whoa, it's the Atlas. And then we just play like dog shit for the next few weeks. And then everyone's like, all right, they suck. They're done. And then we just run the table and almost win a championship. So this team's the same, man. You just don't know what's going to happen from week to week. But when you look at the Cannons, me and Scotty were talking about it this week. This is a dangerous situation where a team, all it takes is one guy, could be two, start to mentally check out. Maybe they don't dive for that out of bounds. Maybe they don't make that second slide. Maybe they lose a ground ball and stand there for a split second instead of chase it down. And when you're playing a team like the Redwoods, who still firmly believes that they can make the playoffs, that's dangerous. And when you have TD there, I know TD's not having the year that everyone thought he would have, but there's many reasons to that. But if TD's winning the majority of the draws, and this is a game where each team is getting a fair possession, I feel like the Redwoods defense is better than the Cannons, and I think that'll be the difference maker in this game.
Well, and from your time playing, and of course your time as an analyst and a fan now, the word or the phrase like must win gets thrown around like crazy. You know what I mean? Like, a lot of the times if a team's in a must win position, it's because they haven't done too well the entire year. So must win, yes, okay, it's a hyperbolic statement, but it kind of feels like this Cannons game is a must win. Like, if they don't get this one done, could you see some of those elements of maybe that checking out, maybe saying, hey, it's just not their year? Like how are you seeing it from the outsider perspective? Must win in name or must win by nature?
Yeah, I hate must win. We've ruined that term.
Yeah.
Just like GOAT, we totally ruined the term.
And amazing, awesome, like all those hyperbolic
Yeah.
words, just throw them out the window.
Yeah, yeah. And I'll leave the hyperbole for the ESPN commentators because they do way more of that than anybody could. But I think from a player standpoint, it's daunting because you're like, we're 1-6 for a reason, right? But they're not getting blown out by teams, but they're just losing constantly. Last week they actually went over 50% in faceoffs and they still lost. And it was like, that's like, it's just demeaning. You know, you're just like, ugh. Now it's daunting because you're sitting there going, not only do we have to win this game, this is must win. Every single game the rest of the season is going to be must win. Yeah. They have to win the rest of them. So it's just one of those things where, you know, any one of those games, like say they just play their guts out and they pull this off and they win this game, which they totally could. It's like, okay, well, now you got 5 days to get ready. We got to do it again. And then we got to do it again. So that's where the mental aspect of
weighs on you.
The dog fight at the end, that's where that stuff can happen.
So I'm just wondering, as far as like a betting perspective, because I'll be honest, Greg, I ain't touching this game with a 10-foot pole. Like I'm not laying points with Redwoods. And honestly, because of that desperation angle for Cannons, I don't even know if I could lay the money line. So is there anything actionable for you in this game where you think, hey, there's some better spots on the board? Maybe just pass this game and watch Friday night. Are you potentially betting this game or how are you eyeing it?
I mean, I'm not betting. I'm not betting on any PLL games. I feel bad because I have somebody I like on every single team. Like I have friends.
Yeah.
But like I have to do the picks every week for our podcast and I hate it. But this week I went with the Redwoods. I went with the Redwoods because I think the 2-pointer could be an equalizer in this game.
Great point.
I feel like if the faceoffs are relatively even at a transition, that somebody in the Redwoods could come out of the box and pull up. And that 1 or 2 extra shots, that could be the difference in this game. And I do feel like the 2-pointers are going to be the difference maker in this game.
The 2-bomb maybe giveth or taketh away for the Cannons. That's Friday night. That's the Redwoods Cannons game. Let's get into Saturday and talk this Chrome and Chaos game. Chrome 1.5-point favorites. Another little bit of a head scratcher line there. Total 23.5. Again, first time these teams are playing. Last year it was a 14-12 win for Chaos. But that game also, for what it's worth, had Chrome as a 1.5-point favorite. So really the story coming into this one, Greg, is 4-0 out of the gate. Oh my God, look at this Chrome team. And now it's 3 straight losses. Like, is this a skid they can snap out of, or was that maybe 4-0 start a bit of a mirage? Like, how are you seeing this Chrome team?
Well, that was the thing that everybody was sitting there going after 1-0. Yeah, 2-0. And then 3-0, everyone's like, man, maybe they're for real. Then they hit 4-0 and everyone's like, okay, they're good. Then they lose 3 in a row. Now, this is something where, because the Chrome have historically, since the league started, has not been a playoff team, and they've had a tough go. This is where it can get mentally into the psyche of some of those vets, where they're going, shit, we're the Chrome. Like, we're not the Chrome, we're still the Chrome. And when you're the Chaos, this is why this week was so hard for me to pick. The Chaos are doing exactly what we thought they did. I've compared them to collegiate version, the pro version of Duke, where Duke could start off the season 0-4 and no one would bat an eye. Like, Tito's going to have these guys ready to roll.
It's what happens. It's just February. They always lose a big game in February.
So Chaos is different. Chaos is the same thing where they are just Andy's going to have them going. That offense, those guys have shaken out their indoor legs after the break. I think the Chaos can absolutely make a run at this. I went back and forth like 3 times on my pick for this yesterday. The defining factor really for me, for people that were watching this game this weekend, Chaos versus Redwoods, the faceoff has been a point of contention the way it's officiated. They were letting Max Adler just completely go as early as he wanted this past game. And my phone lit up like a Christmas tree. I had college coaches texting me. I had high school kids. What is going on?
What's going on?
I would be shocked if poor Seth Tierney didn't walk into his office with 37 messages from every single coach in the league after that game. If Matty Palin decides to officiate this relatively good, I see the Chrome getting a pretty big possession advantage. If they let Max Adler just do whatever he wants, then I could see him going 60% in this game. That's really what this is going to come down to, in my opinion, because I think if you have the ball half the time as the Chaos, who have won a championship with barely getting any possessions, they don't need possessions in their opinion because they have Blaze Reardon. If Blaze is Blaze and they're getting half the ball half the time, there's really not a way that Chrome can win this game, in my opinion. Now, flip it, and they're getting the ball 60% of the time. I can see the Chrome actually running away with it. So the possession is going to be so important. And honestly, it comes down to what Matty Palin feels like doing that day. That's the scary part.
So really, we need a crystal ball to decide who's going to be doing this one. How is the game going to be officiated? Who has the possessions? Because I think it's a great point that you make. And really what the Chaos have done since getting their horses back from the NLL Cup is just really light it up. I mean, 13 goals, 12 goals, 14 in 3 straight games, reaching those double digits. So regardless how many times they're touching the ball, they're making the most of it. So I don't know. Is this offense legit, or are they just kind of catching goalies on off weeks? Like, do you view this?
They're legit. And Dane Smith is the catalyst. Dane Smith is putting the ball on tape right on your ear, all over the place, and they're having fun. Once these guys start smiling, that's when everybody
dangerous. Yeah, dangerous.
When you see Burns' little sly smile, dude, you're screwed. So yeah. This team is for real. And when they're doing that and O'Keefe is hitting his outside shots, this team, like I said, they need the ball 30 to 40% because their offensive efficiency can go through the roof. And then they can really stymie you with Blaze making saves. And then, we're forgetting, too, that this team used to be, their identity was 2 bombs with the long poles. Yeah. And they still have that if they need it. Jack Rowlett, I think Jack Rowlett and CJ Costabile can also make a difference off the faceoff wings. I mean, those guys have each had games where they've had multiple points off of faceoffs. So I think the Chaos are primed for a run here. In fact, on my own podcast, I picked the Chrome, and I just talked myself back into the Chaos winning this game.
See, for bettors, here's a good teaching point. If you're doing what Greg's doing and you flip-flop 300 times in the game, don't bet the game. Just pass it, run away. Now, last thing on this one, and then we're going to get into our total talk, and it's a good segue because, we just talk about this Chrome team coming alive. We talk about the Chaos doesn't really need many possessions to fill it up. So I look at this total 23.5, and I don't know how much, you dive into really looking at the totals. You said you're not betting them with your own money, but 23.5 for 2 teams whose offenses seem like they can fill it up. Like, are they trying to bait us with that kind of low 23.5 line saying, oh, here comes the over? Because this seems like regardless how the game script kind of plays out, unless it's Blaze Reardon standing on his head, which could happen, I don't know, 23.5 seems a little low, Greg.
You just hit the nail on the head, in my opinion. I think the reason it's low is because, the Blaze. Chaos could totally go off and score 16 goals.
Yeah,
Blaze could be Blaze.
Fair.
And that's why I won't touch the OU with the Chaos, because
because you never know what Reardon's going to do.
What the hell's going to happen? Like, Blaze could go nuts. So yeah, that's why. That's actually a really accurate OU. I mean, it all depends on if the Chrome get enough possessions, and like we said, like unless you're caddying for Matty Palin right now, on the links, nobody else knows what's going to happen this week.
I guess we'll find out once the first face-off goes. That's the first game going on Saturday. Greg, let's get into our total talk here. It's Atlas and Water Dogs. Atlas 1.5 point favorites. Total in this one, your OU, your over-under 24.5. Last year when these two teams played off, again, first time they're meeting this year, only 19 goals. And I know it's different teams now, so you can't really extrapolate that info from last week, but this one's tied for the highest total of the week. Like, is that justified? Is this Water Dogs offense back? They're buzzing. Atlas shown that they can score no matter where they are on the field. So what, you expect some goals in this one? How do you see the game script on this one kind of shaking out, Greg?
Yeah, I do see this being a high scoring one. I think both offenses are young and buzzing a little bit. The veterans that are on the Water Dogs unit. So here's what's crazy is they kind of went off goal-wise this last game, but they were missing Brownie and they were missing Schloss, both out. And, in that game, they lighted up. Now, that's like your main initiator for midfield, and one of the best shooters in the world. So I think, Kieran McCardle is putting himself in that MVP talk right now. I mean, he's like 4th or 5th in the league in points. He's playing like, all-star Kieran McCardle. They're having fun, and they weren't even 50% on faceoffs last game. The thing about the Water Dogs, and the reason I like the over on this, is the Atlas are going to get their possessions, right?
Mm-hmm.
Zach Tucci, I have a feeling, is going to be playing, because Withers has been under 50% a couple games in a row. Tucci was actually starting to gain some form later on when he was starting in his place. Tucci can create offense right away. Kid's an athletic, stand-up style faceoff man. So when the Atlas are winning faceoffs, they can obviously light it up. They can put the ball in the goal. They don't have to rely on an outside shot so that Wardo can, eat it all up. But then when they do put the ball on the ground, the Water Dogs run. Like, the ball's on the ground, that ball is upfield in 4 seconds. It's a goal. So I see the Water Dogs using that kind of ballistic transition to get their goals, and going the other way. I think the Atlas will gain enough possessions where they can light it up. Now, the only thing that challenges that over-under, in my opinion, is Kincannon is playing out of his mind.
Yep.
And he's playing, like I said before, he reminds me a lot of Drew Adams. He's the best inside stopper since Drew Adams. And if the Water Dogs aren't getting transition goals, he's not going to be easy to score on inside.
Ballistic transition. What a term there by Beast Bets. I love it, man. Last thing I want to get into on this game is really just one of the big markets that's really lit up for PLL bettors that's super exciting, because I always view player props as kind of like mini daily fantasy. You take a player, you think they're going to have a big day, you go over. You take a player, you think they're going to have a bad day, you go under. And we have goalie saves that you're able to do. There's ground ball props. So I think that's just insanely exciting for lacrosse fans, because having more opportunities to potentially get down on a game is just going to add more eyes to the sport. So one of the things that we always love hitting on here is some of these player props and whether they're going over or under. I think one of the teams that's been insanely tough to handicap on the player prop side is Atlas, because they have so many guys who can eat. Like them and an Archers team are teams who, they're going to score a lot of goals, a lot of overs, but it's really which team is, or which player is going to have the advantageous matchup this week. So with Atlas, does any player really stand out to you offensively for that squad as someone who you can always have a little bit more confidence that they're going to be going off? Because typically when you look at a Teat, he's going to have higher totals. So he needs to have a huge day after he's getting marked up to go over those. You look at Law, he's a kind of hit or miss guy. Is he hot that game? Great. He's recorded at least 1 point in every game this year, so he's consistent for sure. And then you have that wild card of Chris Gray, who he's playing at a rookie of the year potential. So that offense, I think, is really hard for people to bet player props on, but everybody wants to because they're so fun to watch. Any player stand out to you as one that you can always maybe count on to potentially have a big day, or is it just a week-to-week, matchup-to-matchup kind of deal?
Well, I think you're right. I think you can always – we were talking about the same thing with Lyle. Like, Lyle's going to get his Hattie, right? He's going to get his 3 or 4 points. The question, though, is that number going to be high enough to beat whatever the bet was? And I think I agree with you on Teat. I think an interesting one is Costabile. I think Costabile is an interesting one. I think he's so good at initiating. He's so good at finding, his spot. I feel like that's one that you're going to want to take a look at this week. I'm not sure what his number is this week, but I think Costabile is a fun one to dabble with.
Well, and a lot of the time, because all these other names, I think it was just 2 weeks ago, we had a best bet get home on him over 1.5 points. Because there's so many different players on this team, you maybe just try and find whoever has one of those lower totals, and maybe that's the way you attack it. Maybe you just go over that, because all you're looking for, especially if it's a point, you get an apple and a goal. You get 2 assists, that's going over it. You're not asking them to score the goals. So Costabile, I think you might be onto something, Greg. I think I might have to be run to my app after we're done recording and see what I can get down on that one. So there's our total talk. You can hop in the comments below, give us your thoughts on what player props you're going to be placing this week and which ways you're looking. Again, huge thanks to Greg Gurenlian joining us here. You can follow him on Twitter at GregBeast32. Check out his new podcast with Scotty Rodgers and Danny Seibel. You can find that at Rise Up Podcast. Angle of the week time. it had to be this Whip Snakes and Archers game. The Whips are 1.5-point favorites, despite just playing a 1-goal game anytime they step on the field. Total in this one, 23.5. These two teams played twice last year, and it's almost like you just threw up the blueprint because it was the same either way. Both games finished 15-14. It was 1 win for Archers. It was 1 win for Whip Snakes. So I don't like, Greg, explain to me, man. Like, you've been around lacrosse your entire life. Like, you know how this is a game of runs. You know how nobody's ever truly out of it. Like, it defies logic how the Whips somehow find their way in a 1-goal game every week. Like, is that just the cardiac kids? Like, how does that happen weekly? Because it defies logic in my opinion.
I think the Whip Snakes, because this unit core has been around so long, not just from the beginning of the PLL, but from college, right?
Yeah.
These guys,
they're the Terps. They're the Terps in the pros.
They're the Terps, and they allow a couple Scarlet Knights to hop in there. And I think, the Terp, like this team as a unit, it's kind of like my neighbor and I play darts all the time. Okay. And we always come down to the end, and 90% of the time I win. And I just have this confidence where I'm like, he's going to start to screw up a little bit. Like, I think with the Whip Snakes, that's kind of where they're at, where they play these games and they start to feel it out. But what makes the Whip Snakes so hard to beat is every week they have a different leading scorer. And Matt Rambo, in my opinion, has really come into his own as not just a leader, but also as a more mature player. He doesn't force it. He's not going to sit there on Instagram and worry about you talking shit because he only got 1 point last game. He's like, no, I'm going to get rid of the ball. I'm going to let Zed do it, or I'm going to let somebody else do it. And there's so many weapons. Every week they have a different guy who puts up 4 or 5 points. And I think the Whip Snakes there, and Coach Stagnita does a good job. They sit back in their first quarter, they see what's there, they make a couple tweaks at halftime, and then all of a sudden things start to shine. And they are loaded at every single position. I was talking about how good their defense is because it gets outshined by their offense. Earhart is the American version of the 2000s Brody Merrill. He has omnipresence. Yep. He's all over the field. That face-off unit, it's always 3-on-2 ground balls everywhere. There's always 2 Whip Snakes for every one guy on a ground ball. Their defense, even their shorties, can transition into offense very well, and their attack line is unbelievable. So they don't care. They don't need to blow you out. They're like, dude, we're the Whip Snakes. We've won 2 rings. We're going to win. We just have to figure out how. So that's what I like about them. Now, transitioning to the Archers, and the difference of that is the Archers are still trying to find their groove. They were grooving. Then Ament came back. They had a little bit of a hiccup in the first half of that game when he came back. Then they kind of had a hiccup again. And it looks like, and Scotty Rodgers made a great point for the Archers. He feels like they're one of the only defensive teams in the league who their shorties are lockdown shorties. But they're not really transitional players.
Great point.
And I think that was such a good point because I was like, if you're the Archers, there is, Ratliff can do it, but every team has an LSM that can get to the offensive zone. It's kind of a wholesale change where they're not going to crush you with that transition. So
they need to get settled on offense before they're able to actually spin it around. They're not really transitioning. That's interesting. That's a great point. So in this game, especially, you have, Justin Inacio, he's a rookie. He's fighting to try to figure out this PLL face-off thing. And then Nardella and his unit, and he's got the best wings in the league, and they're just consistently the best. And, it's going to be interesting to see what happens here with that. But I mean, until proven otherwise, I take the Whip Snakes in every single game. Yeah, and it's hard not to. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. And maybe, since it's looking to be a closer game, forget about laying the 1.5. Just, go on the money line, potentially try and get it live. If the Whip Snakes go down, that could be a way to bet it. But you talked a little bit about the Archers there, and this is a team that historically they always are just looked at as, they're always firing. You know what I mean? They're always scoring goals, and this year is no different. They averaged 13 scores per game, but they were humbled a bit last week when they just faced off against the Atlas. And I think you touched upon it a little bit, maybe the addition by subtraction that they had without Grant in the offense and now trying to figure out how he's fitting back in. But, any thoughts on how a team that's always firing plays against a team who also is an offensive juggernaut in Atlas, and they're only able to muster up 9 goals? Like, is that as simple as Kincannon is just playing out of his mind, or is there more kind of going on behind the scenes or on the field chemistry-wise with why the Archers kind of seem to be struggling a little bit here with one of the best players in the world back on offense for them?
Yeah, from the outside looking in, I mean, this team likes each other. They've been together
For
for
sure.
a pretty long time.
Yeah.
They, there is always finger pointing at the face-off position for the Archers. But, at some point you have to give up and you have to say, okay, what else are we doing incorrectly? Now, last game, you're not going to win that game. And why? Because Kincannon is standing on his head.
Yep.
Baptiste is playing at an MVP level. And your goalie, I think Gitz was like in the 30s save percentage wise. That you're not going to win that game, right? And I think when you're in a situation, it's hard to find an Archer game where everything is going their way, right? They're either offensively the efficiency is good, but their defense gave up 15 goals, or they're not winning faceoffs, but they're playing good defense, or they are winning faceoffs, but then Gitz is letting in 30%. It just feels like they can't get everything. And I wonder if it's a mental thing, right? Lacrosse Twitter, which is always a calm and normal place.
No hot takes, nobody jumping down each other's throats there on Lacrosse Twitter.
But these people, they're frauds. They're always, they look good on tape, but then, they always fail at the end of the season. That stuff, for professional player, professional athlete, you are human. And that stuff can start to sneak into your head. I know in my career, I made it to championships before plenty of times and we lost. Until 2015, that was in my head all the time. Like, man, maybe I'm the problem, so I don't know if that's going on in some of their heads, but it seems like there's some kind of identity issue with this team where we're seeing them not be able to put everything together at the same time. And if you play the Whip Snakes and you don't have everything going at the same time, you don't win.
Great insight there from former player, from former MLL MVP from the faceoff position. Huge shout out to Greg joining us here on the show. If you want to hear some more thoughts from him, from Scotty, Rodgers, from Danny, check him out on the Rise Up podcast. Last thing, Greg, and you kind of touched upon it there, the MVP level that Trevor Baptiste is playing at. I just saw this insane line movement that I just kind of want to talk through and get, from your perspective, looking from the outside and also as a player, knowing what it takes to take the whole rigmaroles of a season and end up on the other side as the MVP from a highly specialized position, which is what Trevor Baptiste is potentially going to be doing. So Monday morning, odds open up. Trevor Baptiste is plus 400, 4-1 to win the MVP. Within hours, I'm talking like an hour and a half, he's down to 275. So for recreational bettors who don't really understand live movement, that means that either a shit ton of people were betting on Trevor Baptiste or the books got a couple big time bets from bettors they respect that was on Trevor Baptiste to win the MVP. We don't know. We don't know who's betting those numbers. We just know that the line moved. So the line opens up on another book. He's down to plus 150. So that's 1.5. If you bet $10, you get $15 back on that bet. So that's what is known as major steam. There's a lot of money coming in on Trevor Baptiste. I mean, it's hard to make a case of a player who's meant more to his team than Trevor Baptiste. You know what it's like trying to get that MVP award or just putting it down, letting the chips fall where it may. Not saying that all Trevor Baptiste is caring about is getting an MVP award, but it is some rarefied air when a faceoff guy is able to do it. So just thoughts on that major movement. Is that justified move? And how are you kind of viewing this MVP race and maybe how it's decided?
Sure. Yeah, there's a few different facets of this. So my 2015 season, when people ask me about the MVP season, a lot of things had to fall in place for a faceoff guy to win, right? I had my own record I broke by over 10% that year. So I had to annihilate every record that's ever been written for faceoffs. I had to make it to the championship game. I had to make it that far. And I needed no offensive players to have a shining season. So you had the argument between Jordan Wolf that year and Rob Pennell, who's the offensive player. There was no defining guy who was kind of taking off and getting close to having a record-breaking season in offense. Good point. If any guy was overshadowing the rest on offense, forget it. It was over. So all of that had to happen for me. Now, when you look at Trevor, it's different. I played in a 16-game season. This season is 70% over already. And I think the reason the line moved like that is because people are looking at it going, oh, shit, there's only 3 games left in the season. This guy's killing everybody. But also, you look at who he's going to go against leading up. Now, he has gone against almost every single one of these teams. The only game he hasn't is this weekend, and it's going against a rookie. So when you look at that, you're like, yeah, it's a very safe bet that he's going to be in the 70% area, right? That 70% is insanely, it's ridiculous.
Yeah.
Okay. I remember like even I in my season, I was like, this is crazy. Like this is nuts. So and he's doing it so fluidly against other people who've also had good seasons, right? I think at this point, Joe Nardell is probably second in the league in faceoff percentage, and Trevor dispatched him without even a glance. So they're going to get another shot, and I feel like if he smokes him all over again, you're sitting here going, okay, the one game he was out, they lost, right? And like, so you're looking at this thing now. I told Trevor because Trevor and I had a good conversation about this. Like, you want to win MVP, and I think I wanted to win it because I wanted faceoff guys to feel valued. At that time in our sport, I wanted to make a statement that we're important. And I'm not the 72 Dolphins. I do not want to be the only guy who's done this. If anything, I would love for it to be my boy. So he wants to do this thing. And I told him, I was like, look, like, I know this is an important thing, but if you focus on getting to championship weekend, it can become reality. Yeah. No one's going to give a face-off guy MVP if his team doesn't get past the first round of the playoffs.
Great point.
If he leads them to the championship game and he continues to stay at this tempo, face-off percentage-wise, I don't see – because, look, the league leader in points right now is Lyle Thomas. They're dead last in the league, right? If you look at other guys who are scoring, they're on his team with him that are kind of in that high scoring.
So you can make the argument that would they be scoring if he wasn't winning at such a clip? Yeah, so, it kind of plays into it that it's pretty tough to make a case for anybody but him. I just find that stuff kind of fascinating, and that's why I love the fact the stars just aligned and we had you as our guest to talk a potential face-off MVP. So, Greg, terrific stuff, man. Again, people can check out that Rise Up podcast. This is just a sprinkle of the knowledge that Greg brings to that show each and every week. So where else can people find you, Greg? And again, thanks again for coming on, man.
Yeah, thanks a lot, brother. This was awesome. Greg Beast 32 on all platforms. I have a YouTube channel as well, youtube.com/Greg Gurenlian, and the Rise Up podcast. You can get Rise Up podcast on all the different Spotify, Apple, YouTube, everything. And we're just talking lacrosse, baby. I love it.
The absolute beast. Love it. That's going to do it for us on another edition of Over and Back. If you enjoyed the show, hit that like button. Make sure you subscribe. You never miss a show. And reach out to us on Twitter. Let us know what bets you're making this weekend. As always, bet responsibly, and we'll talk to you next week on Over and Back.